I was just getting back to back to back electrical diag, and the advisors had a hard time selling the time on it. But I had to fix it. Like, this is just the way my brain is wired. I've got a problem in front of me. I got to fix it, and I fixed it. I fixed all of them.
Yeah.
But the guy a couple bays down, where all he does is bang out brakes and ball joints and wheel bearings all day, he's getting paid 50% more than I am.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting, thought-provoking episode of the Jaded Mechanic Podcast. My name's Jeff, and I'd like to thank you for joining me on this journey of reflection and insight into the toils and triumphs of a career in automotive repair. After more than 20 years of skin knuckles and tool debt, I want to share my perspectives and hear other people's thoughts about our industry. So pour yourself a strong coffee or grab a cold Canadian beer and get ready for some great conversation. So what I found with the gloves thing, and this really, I can remember probably 5 or 6 years ago, they used to say, oh, we have to provide them for you. Okay, that's fine. We're only going to provide a certain amount per day. Because what they would get really mad about is a guy would literally like put them on, he'd have them on for 3 minutes, and he'd take them off to do smoke a cigarette or something like that, and he'd go get another box or another set of gloves, and they're like, holy crap, he's going through 2 boxes a month versus the other guy that's going through. And at the end of it, it shouldn't really matter, right? I mean, it's PPE, right? It's to be provided.
Yep.
It's important. But it was always like, oh, these gloves. And then you probably saw with COVID, right? As soon as I can remember buying boxes of gloves for $7, $8 for a box.
Yeah.
And now you look at the ones at Princess Auto, that Grease Monkey brand. It's not a terrible glove. They're $18, $19 a box.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I think, is so my last employer, we ended up getting like these food grade restaurant, just junk.
Yeah.
You know, and we're like $5 mil or something like that. Like you could look through them and they weren't doing anything. It was like, well, why can't we get like the gloves that we used to have? Oh, they're up to $21 a box, like from Worth. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but they're good gloves. Like you can actually wear them several hours and they don't rip off.
Yeah.
And whereas these other ones, I'd go to pull them on and they'd rip and tear. So cheap shop owners, cheap management. I don't know. I could have a skin disease because of arseholes like you. So anyway,
yeah.
Kind of to start the conversation off tonight, it's beginning to get a real Canadian flair here on the Jaded Mechanic Podcast. And I'm talking to, last night I talked to BJ from BJ Motorsports on TikTok, and that's the second time recording with him. And, you know, there's been a few Canadians. I'm speaking with Lee Forget tonight. And Lee, say hello.
Yeah. I'm Lee Forget. Automotive technician by trade. But I've left automotive for mining.
Yeah. So, first of all, what kind of mine? Like, is it a diamond mine or?
So the mine I'm at right now is a surface gold mine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're up near where exactly?
Gogama. So I live in Sudbury, but the mine is in Gogama, which is halfway between Sudbury and Timmins.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Timmins. So for the Americans that, you know, you're like, well, where the hell is Timmins? Well, I've never been there, but Shania Twain, which the whole world loves, she's famous for being from Timmins.
Yeah.
And I actually had a good friend when I was very young that was from Porcupine.
Oh yeah.
And you know, nobody knew. Like I can remember when he moved down here, I'm like, where the hell is Porcupine? And who calls a town that? But he used to tell me stories about Timmins and Porcupine. And then the farthest I've ever been up that way is I was up to Sudbury when I was in high school for a wrestling tournament.
Oh yeah.
Probably 1991, 92, something like that. And I can remember like driving into the city and I'm like, nothing's growing here. Like,
yeah. So it's actually changed a lot. They put a lot of lime down to neutralize the ground, and now there's trees everywhere. But we still have Sudbury was made from a meteor hit the area. So it's you can't see it if you're just looking around, but it's a crater. But there's lots of hills, and now that they've fixed all of the ground, there's trees everywhere. It's really great if you're into snowmobiling and quadding and hunting and all that.
Yeah. So what what was the transition like to go from working, like you said earlier, we were talking, you worked at a dealership?
Yeah. So I started in the independent world. And I had a lot of bosses that really wanted me to do subpar work. Like, for example, one, I think it was a Dakota or something, had a leaking fuel neck.
Okay.
And I told them, this thing needs a fuel neck. Like, it's leaking. It's no good. Oh, just put some gasket maker on there. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? Like, gas will just eat right through that. And now you got gasket maker in your gas tank. Oh, just do it. I'm your boss. All right. So I splooge it full of gasket maker and let it sit overnight in the shop. And the next day, he brings it over to the gas station across the street. Gas everywhere, all over the ground. Didn't even make it one fill up. Right. So just that's just an example. And yeah, I kept bouncing shop to shop because they kept wanting me to do these subpar repairs, and I just wasn't into it.
So why do you think because we all have been through stories like that, or at least if we didn't have to go through it ourselves, we all talk to other people in groups and sessions and training nights and stuff like that, and they tell stories like that. Why do you think so many shops leak? Like, what makes them do that kind of thing?
I feel like they're doing it with maybe not the customer's best interest, but just trying to get it the cheapest for the customer. So like the cheapest repair is a gasket maker, but it's not in their best interest because it's not going to fix it.
And it's not even technically a repair.
Yeah, it's you know what I mean? To call it a Band-Aid would be excessive. Like it's nothing. And
yeah, it didn't do anything. Yeah. It's just wasted work. And it's wasted time.
And let's say it did work that time. When then you release the vehicle to the customer, he burns a tank, goes to put fuel in it. He's, oh man, this thing's leaking again. Come on, I just had it at the shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It always frustrated me for stuff like that. And I never understood why, except that what I always felt was like going on is that they were like, well, the customer wants it done as cheap as possible, which, okay, lots of customers do. I mean, I don't want to pay more for something than I absolutely have to.
Yeah.
But there really is only one right repair in that situation, right? And in a lot more situations than probably in this industry we want to admit, there really is only one right repair.
Yep.
But it's when we kind of widen out the standards, I guess, a little bit, might be the polite way of saying it. You can get into people going, well, there's more than one way to skin a cat, or there's more one way to, fix a car. But, that kind of thing is like, if you were driving the truck yourself, you'd probably wouldn't, if you owned it as a shop owner, you probably wouldn't bother with that, right? Yeah. You would just order the part. So if you've got a customer that won't, why do you give them the liability of being able to say they couldn't fix it for me by allowing them to dictate such a, shitty repair, pardon my French?
Yeah. I mean, you got to educate the customer, tell them what's going on, why this repair is the right repair. And then ultimately it's up to them to make that decision. Either you go ahead with it or you don't. Maybe they bring it somewhere else.
Yeah. So you bounced around at quite a few shops like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably, oh geez, I don't know, 4 or 5 shops.
Wow.
Same story over and over. I did a small stint at Canadian Tire, just like any other Canadian technician.
I haven't yet. I have not yet. I joked that when I retire, I might work the parts counter. Just because I could go in and like, you're not going to need that. Get the hell away from me. Like I could do that. And then I could start there every January. Yeah. And I'd probably get fired by May, and I could fish until November. There you go. And then I could get hired at another one, and the cycle would continue, right?
Yeah, that's a good plan.
Do you think Sudbury, was it the area that was why the shops were like that, or is it just the shops?
Sudbury has a very widespread income where there's a lot of people that have very low income and a lot of people that have high income, not a lot in the middle. And I think those people at the bottom just happened to go to the shops that I worked at. I do know there are some good shops for sure here, but like I got friends that work at them. I didn't get that experience. And
What was
I'd like to start this out with, I love the automotive industry, but man,
okay?
I've had a lot of bad experience.
Yeah. So what was Canadian Tire like? Because I mean, I've never
Yeah.
worked it. I've worked with a couple guys that have worked it in the past. Some tell me different things. Some have said they were able to make some money there, but it was a constant fight with the service advisors or the service manager because they weren't always the most experienced in the industry, right? And then I've had other people that have just said it was the worst tenure they ever did in the industry. So,
Yeah. And
what was yours like?
so in my experience, the guy who broke the most stuff made the most money.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, it's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah.
It's,
Did they just think he was like untouchable or
yeah,
like,
I don't know. He just Canadian Tire takes no responsibility for anything that gets broken.
mhm.
So they just say, "Oh, it's broken, so you got to pay to fix it." At least at this branch, when I was there, blah blah, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, there were some great techs there, and they moved on to do great stuff. But yeah, mostly I think it was older, getting ready to retire techs that I don't know, that they broke a lot of stuff, man, and
Yeah.
they would just end up getting the customer to pay for it. It was rough.
Well, you mean break so like breaking like a panel when they're trying to pull a door panel off to do a window reg or something like that, or
Yeah, I mean, like anything, like, or say you're pulling a vacuum line off and the nipple breaks off. Oh well,
Mhm.
customer buys a new intake tube or whatever, right? Anything.
Yeah.
Say they don't say they're doing they're pulling apart some drum brakes and they don't back off the adjuster and they
Mhm.
rip the whole brake assembly apart. It needs brakes. It needs a kit, needs shoes, needs everything, needs drums. Even if they're like obviously not brand new because there was a rust ridge, but like in really
Yeah.
good condition. Uh, yeah,
It's getting all new.
yeah, customer pay, unfortunately.
Do you think that's the way they were getting paid was pushing for that kind of quality?
Yeah, it was a straight time plus bonus pay
Okay.
structure, so that probably did have something to do with it.
Mhm.
Uh,
There's a Midas in town here that pays like that. And actually, so my friend that had worked at a Canadian Tire, he now works there. And for him, he really likes it because now their straight time hour wage sucks. It's in the toilet. It's low. But everybody will tell you, well, like I get X amount percentage of parts and I get X amount percentage of service sold, like hours at the end of the month. So I do really good. And I'm like, well, is everybody doing really good? They're like, well, that guy's not, but I mean, he doesn't hustle the way I do. Okay. Because I mean, I'm not a hustler. Like, I'm not a guy that's just going to go in and try and knock out 20 hours, right? Like,
yeah,
I've got a comfortable, consistent pace. I'm older, I hurt a lot. So, I don't want to go in and do 10 sets of tires by lunch, right? Just to, try and make some upsells. Like I can't work like that anymore. The body just won't do it.
yeah, I feel
But
you there. Like in my younger days, I could hustle pretty good, but as I get older, I just it sucks because you hold yourself to that level, and then you feel bad that you can't do it. But
yeah, especially if financially, like if I don't know how some of these techs do because it's like as every time I've moved jobs, I've always managed to make more an hour, right? And the
yeah,
last little bit has always been straight time. I mean, I haven't been in a dealer in quite a while, probably 4 or 5 years now, and I mean, I was in the dealer and I wasn't doing good because none of us were doing good. There was too many techs and not enough work. There was
yeah,
too many techs and advisors that couldn't sell. We had a complete customer base that had been based on the idea that everything on the car was covered. It was oil changes for life. Your maintenance was free is what in their brain.
yeah,
So they didn't want to buy anything. You couldn't sell them a brake service. You couldn't sell them a brake flush. You couldn't sell them a cabin air filter, right? Like it was a real tough thing. So, and then when you've got that many techs and they're fighting, then warranty becomes what you're all after. it doesn't, it's not long before nobody's making 40 hours a week. And, everybody that says in the industry, flat rate is the answer. Well, flat rate's the answer if you've got more than enough work. But when you don't, and then you go, or you upset the apple cart and you bring one more tech in and you divide all the hours that are coming in by one more and watch everybody's average go down, that's not a fix, because you just took the morale and kicked it right in the teeth,
Yeah, and it can't just be the work. You got to have the right service advisors. You got to have the right service manager. You got to have the right parts team. Everything has to be perfect for flat rate to work well.
When you're at Canadian Tire, I always wanted to ask that. How does the parts thing work? Like, do you guys have to did you have to look it up? Or did you just kind of go to the advisor and go, it needs, front rotors, front pads, 2 front calipers, and, this is my labor?
It was a while ago, but I think I would go to like the parts wicket, and then I'd tell them what it needs, the year, make, and model, and then we would go through it together. And like if there are different grades, I would say, yeah, choose whatever, white box rotors, but ceramic pads, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah.
It's why put that on the tech to decide which grade of part was going on? Like, was that a situation of, you guys didn't talk to the customer to know kind of their feeling for budget or what they wanted to do right? Or did you just look at the car and make the decision?
Yeah. So after that would happen, I'd have the quote and I'd go to the front, and then I'd say, hey, this is what it is. This is why I chose these parts. And then the service advisor would get a hold of the customer. And then if the customer said, could you do it cheaper? Then he'd come back to me and I'd say, yeah, okay, maybe get cheaper for this or whatnot. Or no, really, that's as cheap as you can get and still have a quality repair.
Right.
And then at that point, it's up to the customer and what they wanted to do. And actually the service advisors at Canadian Tire actually never fought back on that, which was pretty good. I haven't had a lot of good experience with service advisors. Have you had many good service advisors?
I've had, one I can say was really, really responsible for my success at the one dealers, because he understood that I would I would get to the bottom of what the problem was in the car. If the car had been in 3-4 times, and there was obviously, by then there was probably something legitimately wrong, but nobody else would. He would come to me and say, "Hey, I've got a customer, and they've been in 3-4 times. It's made its rounds around the shop. Nobody can seem to figure it out. Can you take a look at it?" And he'd tell me flat out, and I would tell him. He'd say, they're a really good customer. They've got 3 other cars. They bought 3. They'll spend money at the dealer. And I would be like, sure. And I would find the problem, look over the car. And for the most of the time after that, that became my customer. That customer came in and asked for me to work on their car. So we kind of built up our own client base with that customer, with that advisor. And he was fair. Like, I mean, if I made a diag call and it was wrong, he knew I wasn't going to come to him and try and throw a bunch of parts at it to try and fix it. Yeah. I was going to be there that night until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, trying to find where the wire was broken or whatever and fix it. I didn't whine to him, because it was like it was our customer.
Yeah.
But I had an advisor that, like, funny, Canadian Tire, they quoted a rear exhaust manifold on a Caravan, and the customer took it there. They gave him the quote. I think Canadian Tire had tried to add extra time, not faulting them for it, because every bolt on the manifold was rotten, rounded right off.
Yeah.
It wasn't a 3.5 hour re and re anymore. It was like 6. And the other advisor, he just booked the van in. The part was already there. I did the manifold job. I clocked out when it was done, paid 3.5. I had 6 in it. And I said to him, that's the last time you're ever going to do that to me, because if you do it to me again, I'm going to reach into your pocket and I'm going to get the money out. And he knew I was serious.
Yeah.
He knew, because I'd had a situation where an advisor, I tell this story, wrote it up for a customer saying signal light flashes really fast on one side. We all know what that is. And he said to me, if it's a bulb, they're not going to replace the bulb. They'll do the bulb themselves. I'm like, but they want to know what's wrong?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, they need to know what's wrong. Cool. So I open up I go back to the tail lamp, pull the 2 tail lamps off the backside of the Caravan, swap them, plug it in, because you could do that in 3 minutes. And it's a dead bulb, obviously. It's flashing.
Yeah.
And so I put the back in, drive it around, close the thing off. He doesn't pay me anything. It's zeroed out. And I went, what's going on there? And he's like, well, I told you if it's just a bulb, they're not going to pay to put the bulb in. I said, that's fine. We didn't put a $15 bulb or whatever it would be charged for them. But I said, I've got half an hour or quarter of an hour clocked. You got to pay me my quarter of an hour. And he didn't want to do it. And I pitched a stink until he reached into his own wallet, took out like $12 or something, and paid me.
Yeah.
And he bitched and moaned about that. But you know what? If you want to do that for your customer as an advisor, go ahead and do it. How many times a day would you do it, though? Not too long before it wouldn't even be worth the doing it, right?
Yep.
It wouldn't even be worth having a customer here. And people look at that and go, that's a shit attitude. It's not a shit attitude. If the customer can't put the bulb in, can't diagnose the bulb, they bring it to us. They want us to diagnose their problem. They want us to tell them what's wrong. If the you know how it is, the macho man says, oh, if it's, the wife, I'll get my husband to put a bulb in. I just want to know why this thing is flashing. Cool. They still contracted us to tell them what's wrong with the car. We gave them an estimate. We gave them a diag. We proved what it needs. Somebody's got to get charged for that. Somebody has to pay for it. If you want to unapply that, unbill it, whatever, that's cool. But the tech doesn't donate the time for that. Not ever.
Yeah.
Not ever.
And that's where management has to come in and say, okay, we'll give them a quarter hour out of training or out of goodwill or something. And the dealerships or the shop still needs to pay that tech because the tech did the work.
Yeah. And see, I had one manager, he would back us on that. He was very good about, like, if the tech spent the time, the tech came up with the solution, you pay the technician.
Yep.
Right? You charge the customer, you pay the technician. Now, some of the advisors hated to any kind of pushback, any kind of conflict, if it was like, oh, it's so simple, I can't charge them for that. It's not so simple, or else they would have done it their damn self.
Yep.
So we got to stop in this industry thinking everything is so friggin' simple. When you see the next generation rolling down the road that's motorists, it isn't that simple. And even if it is, they're not interested in doing it themselves.
Yep.
They want it done for them. Charge them to do it.
Yeah,
it's not rocket science. It's nothing personal. It's not ethics. It's not morals, right? If you get aggressive with what you're charging, I mean, I'm not saying we should charge an hour.
Yeah, it's got to be fair. It's got to be fair for everybody.
But how many times, Lee, you've done it too, where you write it up, license plate light doesn't work, and the service advisor says, "Oh, it's probably just a bulb." So you get your ticket handed back to you, and it's 0.4 for a bulb in rear or whatever. You go in there, and it's like, the bulb's not dead. There's a broken wire somewhere not feeding the bulb. Now what do you do?
Yeah.
Go back together? So we could, in this industry, we could start to say, hey, every complaint should be treated as an hour. Whether it's a headlight bulb, tail lamp bulb, whatever. But everybody loses their mind and go, you can't charge that. Why not?
Well, if you only got 2 hours booked into it and you got 4 lines, so that's 4 hours. I mean, that's where you got to kind of be fair with the customer. You say, okay, it only took me 2 hours to get it all figured out. Sure, I'll only charge you 2. But when those keys come across that desk and go into your hand, there's got to be an understanding that you're going to get paid for the work that you're doing.
So I don't always fault the advisor. I mean, I faulted the advisor when the manager had set a process and a standard down, and they were trying to tweak that to make it easier with their interaction with their customer, or tweak it to try and sell more work at my expense, because I'm not the marketing department, right? You don't get to market your service department off of my charity.
Yeah.
That's not how this works. So he was pretty good. I felt bad because him and we had a good relationship, but I did it on principle. That quarter of an hour is worth $10. I'm going to need that $10. And it kept our relationship, because he didn't do it again after that. I think he knew at that point with me or with a customer that didn't want to pay for a bulb, that he probably said, it's probably just a bulb. I have to charge you to check it. You don't want to be charged to check it. We're just going to pretend that you don't have a problem with your signal light then, because you don't want us to check it out. And I don't know why shops can't grasp that concept. I mean, I know that they do sometimes, but it's always like they see that and they think, I don't know if they think, well, what's the customer going to say? Or if they think, and the customer, I guess, could go out of there and say, and tell everybody we're so expensive, that we're ripping them off. Ripping them off is when you do something and it doesn't fix the car.
Yeah.
I'm not if I give a customer $50 to do a mundane task that they don't want to do for themselves, and they decide that $50 is ripping them off, who cares what their opinion is? They're not willing to do it themselves. So they're an expert all of a sudden to say that $50 is too much money?
Yeah. If they wanted to get free work done, maybe they should have went to Part Source or Napa or whatever and asked them to do it. And they probably would have did it for free for something that's pretty easy to get to.
I mean, you see it.
Skilled labor costs money.
Yeah, I can remember way back, my advisor friend Mike used to tell me they used to do advisors all day long. Somebody would walk up to the parts counter at Canadian Tire, buy, the first snowfall of the season, buy a new set of wipers. Can you go put them on for me?
Yeah.
He said every year we would go and then somebody would lean over the windshield, pull the window arm or something like that, crack the windshield. And he said, so we got to where we were buying so many windshields for customers for free wiper installs that's where the sign had to go above the parts counter at the Canadian Tires now that say all wipers come with a $15 or $20 now install fee. Not because that guy's making any money on putting them on, but it's covering those kind of incidentals that happen. I wish we could all go back to, where you could just help people out and they'd appreciate it. But the reality is, I'm the jaded one for saying it. Most people don't appreciate. There's no loyalty anymore. You might put this set of wiper blades on for them now and put it on for free. And the next time they need a wiper blade, they might roll into Mr. Lube, because Mr. Lube will put 2 free ones on when they do their oil change for them. That could be part of the promo.
Yeah.
Like you may never see that customer back, right?
Yeah.
On some of the customers that are in the market today. And that's the thing we don't talk about is everybody goes, well, my customer, and my customer. There's a lot of us that operate in this industry that our customers, sometimes it's a one-time customer. You may never see that customer again. And it isn't because we did anything wrong. They just might be like, they put 4, brakes at every corner and 4 tires on it and a set of struts. And the next time, if the muffler falls off, they get a new car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't come back to you to fix it. They're done. So what, you didn't have good experience with advisors?
I've had a lot of okay advisors, but like they all came from different industries and they didn't understand cars at all. And even if you spent 20 minutes kind of describing something, they would have a really hard time relaying that to the customer. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they would say like the exact opposite of what you just told them. Like you're standing there and they're talking to the customer and they're saying the exact opposite of what you said. And then they still need this part. I don't know. It's tough because a lot of mechanics don't have the skills to sell work.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of service advisors don't have the knowledge to really advise properly. So what do you do? I don't know. I've heard some shops where each tech sells their own work. So the mm-hmm. technician, and I bet that works great in that shop, but it's probably a small shop and they don't have a lot of customers or a lot of techs, and they were able to teach those techs how to sell. But like something like that would never work at a dealership.
Not even close.
No,
not even close. I mean, in my tenure at the dealers, there have been times I've been on the phone with the customer because I'm trying to get more information about when does the car act up, or if the customer's just got too many questions and I'm standing there next to the advisor waiting to get the okay for the job, right?
Yeah.
Which is not maybe the best scenario, but it happened. And they say, well, let me talk to they'll say, well, let you talk to my tech here for a minute. He can explain it better than me. I never had a problem with that if the customer was respectful.
Yeah.
But I've always been like the type that if you're disrespectful, and sometimes you know what that's like.
Yeah.
You can just tell by the condescending tone that they talk to you in that it's okay. Two things can happen here. I'm going to get disrespectful back, or I'm going to bow out of the conversation because the person that's going to be getting disrespected will be the advisor, not me, because it's in their job description, unfortunately, to deal with customers, not really so much in mine, right? There should be better at it than me.
Yep.
And, I've seen, I saw a technician and a service advisor at the dealership next door to us. We owned it. It's a Mazda dealer. And there had been an ongoing dispute going on back and forth between an advisor and a tech. And it came to fisticuffs out in the parking lot. And the technician certainly got the better of that advisor. Now, they both lost their job.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that technician had another job before, without too long. And the advisor, I'm not sure. Because it was a situation of, and it was a toxic thing. Like it was always like he was whining about not enough time or, unrealistic shave time. I don't know the whole story. And it just, they kept picking back and forth at one another, and management didn't step in and say, okay, he doesn't do your work orders right, or whatever might have been the solution. I don't know. I'm not an HR person. But that was the worst I'd ever seen go down between an advisor and a technician. That was the worst.
I think the thing I hated most about being a tech, especially in flat rate, was me having to come up with a time for each job. Like, just to me, just look it up in the book. Whatever the book says, that's what it is. If there's something like that rear manifold job you're talking about where all the nuts were all rotten, well, yeah, then of course that's going to be over and above. But like, especially working at a dealership, like everything's not that old, and usually you're not dealing with something like that. So just charge whatever the book says. Why should I have a different time than the guy next to me, to the guy next to him, to the guy next to him? It's not fair to the customer. And I don't want to be the jerk that's charging 150% to what the guy a few bays down would. And that's not fair to me that he gets paid more than I do.
Yeah. We'd see that a lot with like, 4 different techs that do the same steering rack in a caravan. And, there was a book time of whatever. We all could hit the book time, but it just mysteriously seemed to get rounded up every time somebody else got to it, to where, so what should have been a 4.8 wound up being some guy's bay, 5.4, even 6, right? Yeah. Depending on how good the math was. And you're like, how does that happen with that? Right. Yeah. And so, and they were pretty good about keeping that stuff in check. If the book is 4.8, you can all do it within 4.8. There's no need to round this up. Rounding up became a situation of where, like that manifold job, when it was pretty rusty, there was, if we had to do a dash pull, for instance, and you got in there and found it had an aftermarket remote start system in it, we normally added extra time, because the way you would traditionally pull that dash or go in there and pull that harness, you had a bunch of things right in your way, right? All kinds of stuff that you had to make sure that when you put it back together, that thing worked after the fact. So you had to give yourself some more time. That manifold job was the one time that was like, and it was, so I want to say that was probably around 2008, and it was probably like a 98 3.3 or 3.8 caravan. So it was not it was an already a really rusted, really old 10-year-old turd. If it had been 5-6 years old, it wouldn't have been a problem, but it was just so old. And what irked me is that obviously whoever had looked at it before knew that it was going to require more time. And that's why the customer had not accepted that as an answer. And they had called, and we booked it right over the phone without even inspecting it, without even doing it, and then sacrificed the tech. The right thing to do should have been service should have just covered the difference. And,
yeah. Or whenever it got in and you seen how bad it was, just kind of pump the brakes and go, all right, like this thing's kind of pretty rotten. This is going to take more than what you charged.
That's a slippery slope though, Lee? Because we've all probably been in situations like that where you go out and you say, I'm going to need more time for this. And how many times did you get pushback saying, all you guys always want more time, or all you guys, you've seen that, right?
Yeah, for sure. So typically I would take pictures or videos or whatever, so I could show and prove like, hey man, look, like this is, this is not going to be done in the amount of time that book says it would if those fasteners were the size they were supposed to be. But now I got to go 3 sizes down and hammer it on and hope it grabs. And if it doesn't grab, and cutting it off, and now I'm extracting a head stud, and hopefully I don't go too far and go into the water jacket.
Yeah. There's always one shop, like there's always one tech in every shop though, that everybody says, excuse me, well, he can get it done in that time frame. So obviously it can be done that way. And I want to think that maybe more of them were like the guy that you had that broke the most stuff, right? Yeah. He's the guy that could get it done all right.
Yeah.
So how did you wind up in a dealership situation then?
I don't remember what shop I was working at, but there was an opening at the local Honda dealer. And I was working at a tranny shop, and we had lost our main contract with a used car dealer. Okay. And then we got a contract with CN Rail for working on their rail trucks. And I was like, yeah, that is not something I want to do. So there was an opening at the local Honda dealer, and I was a Honda guy. Mm-hmm. And so I applied and I got in basically right away. And I tried out the dealership life there. So there it was flat rate with guarantee, and the guarantee was 40 hours. So basically it's straight time plus bonus, kind of the same thing, right? And it worked out good there, but it was kind of boring. So at Honda's, it's all maintenance, nothing really breaks. So it was an all right job, kind of boring. From there, I'd moved to Markham, and I worked at a Honda dealer there, and I was doing on the side something called chump car racing. Okay. So it's you get a $500 car, and you put 10 grand worth of safety into it, and you go endurance racing. Right. Yeah. So super cool, a lot of fun. Living out that way, like I'd go to like Bowmanville and stuff, right? And that was fun. The service manager there also raced in jump car, so we got along together really well. I did all the regular maintenance stuff there, but I also did a lot of the electrical diag, and I did anything aftermarket. Nobody else wanted to touch anything aftermarket, and I was really good at aftermarket stuff. So I got all that. And that worked out well.
Aftermarket upgrades, or
like a supercharger or coilovers or whatever, turbos. So they didn't really offer that until I went there, but once I was there, they offered it, and so I got to do some fun stuff along with all the boring maintenance stuff. And Hondas don't really break, so there wasn't a whole lot of big work. So then from there, I'd moved back to Sudbury, and I got in at a Volkswagen Audi dealership. So,
and they break.
Yeah. And they're, you know what? After about 6 months, and I got comfortable, I could really figure them out. It wasn't, I don't know, like every independent shop in Sudbury will just not touch them. They'll just say, go to the dealer. And then, so after like 6 months, I got comfortable. I found all the pattern failures, and I did all of the 2015 TDI updates on every car in Northern Ontario and part of Quebec, except for about 5 or 6.
Wow.
So that shop was understaffed. But they didn't want to be understaffed. But the problem was they didn't physically have enough room to add more bays. But they probably could have. I think we had 6 techs, including myself. We probably could have went to 20 and still been busy.
Wow.
We couldn't do any upsells because there just wasn't time.
Wow. So how did all those cars come from such far away to get done at that shop?
So it's the only Audi dealer in Northern Ontario, and the only Volkswagen dealer. Yeah. So yeah, that job paid, I think it was 9 hours. And the first one I did, the first one 2 other guys did, took 12 hours.
Mm-hmm.
One of them just said, screw this, I'm not doing these.
Right.
The other one tried one more time, lost his ass again. No, I'm not doing it. So after my 4th or 5th one, I got it down to 4 hours at a pretty leisurely pace.
So what was involved in that upgrade? Because like I'm not familiar too well with the TDI thing. I know when the whole Dieselgate thing went down or whatever, but what did it actually involve?
So it was a reprogram. Mm-hmm. You change the DPF. You add a second knock sensor. Okay. And there's a whole bunch of different brackets and stuff that had to be changed. Most of the update though was software. But in order to change the DPF, like you got to drop the subframe, and like it's a fairly involved job. But like I said, I got it down to basically I would just throw everything in a bucket, in a 5-gallon bucket, and everything would come back out of the bucket. And I knew exactly what sockets like some of my sockets I modified, right? Just like any other job. Sure. Where you do it more than once there. And yeah, it was, I was perfectly fine in doing that. If that was my job for, for 4 or 5 months, then I would have been okay with that. It was good. I got it down to a pace where I could still go around the shop and help out other guys with whatever they were doing. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I didn't mind it.
So they just started feeding them all to you.
Yeah.
You had the other guys said, no way, don't give me that. And you just went, okay, well, lump it on me.
Yep. Exactly. They had no interest in doing it. They lost their ass on it a couple times and called it.
So did you find you were starting to make more hours than them, or was it I guess it was lucrative for you? Or
so if I'm really analytical, but I have a way of blocking it out. So when it came to my hours, I didn't look at it at all. I just said, whatever I get paid is what I get paid. Otherwise, I'm going to spend more time looking at my hours than what it will that it gets fixed. Mm-hmm. And I'll get real angry. So I didn't look at my time, and I just, whatever I got paid, I got paid. I didn't want to. No, and that was at any shop I worked flat rate.
You just found a way to make it like you learned to live within what you could rely on getting paid.
Yeah. Because I felt like I would fight for my time more than the time was worth, and the anger I would feel was not worth it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to be the angry guy at the shop.
You didn't want to be me. It's like for me, it's about principle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just about principle. It's a situation of, you got a guy over there that can do X, Y, and Z, but we can't sell X, Y, and Z if the car won't run. So we might be able to get X, Y, and Z sold if we can get this car out in the parking lot to start. So who do we have in this shop that can get it started? Okay, we got one guy.
Yeah.
We got 6 guys that can do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so you can set the shop up 2 ways. That one guy that can get it started, he only does no starts. But what do we do when there's no starts and he can still do X, Y, and Z just as well as the other guy?
Yeah.
Do you punish him? Do you make him sit there and wait for what he's good at? And see, I was never about that. I was just like, whatever you want those guys to be able to do what I can do, I'll try and help them.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they were like, they threw their hands up, said, I don't want any part of that. Don't want to do it. I can't do that. I can't. And there's things like that with me. Don't ask me to take a transmission apart and put it back together. Don't ask me to. I'm not your guy for that. I have zero interest. You could tell me it paid, 30 hours. It's just not my thing. Could I do it? Probably. Yeah, if I did enough of them, but I just have zero interest, right? I have to be interested. So when I would see those guys and, they would do X, Y, and Z all the time, and I didn't get to do that, and they just slaughter me for hours at the end of the week because I got handed one nightmare diag after another, and I got through them. But they'd hit 60 and I'd be hitting 40, and they're like, well, 40 is, 100% efficiency. 40 is good. No, I normally had to be there Monday to Saturday to get 40, and Saturday was normally my best day because I didn't maybe have a diag. So I could go be just a regular mechanic on Saturday and, make some hours, try and round that paycheck up. So that's where I wasn't like you, because I kept looking at it and going, I'm just as smart as them. Why are they getting paid more than me? You might even argue I'm smarter than them. Why are they getting paid more than me? And that's where my principles kind of got me the reputation that it got, So I understand it, though. I understand, like, if I was wired where I could do what you did, I'd still be at some jobs,
Yeah. I really felt that way at the Ford dealer I was at the last shop, where I was just getting back to back to back electrical diag, and the advisors had a hard time selling the time on it. But I had to fix it. Like, this is just the way my brain is wired. I've got a problem in front of me. I got to fix it. And I fixed it. I fixed all of them.
Yeah.
But the guy a couple bays down, where all he does is bang out brakes and ball joints and wheel bearings all day, he's getting paid 50% more than I am. So why is the guy doing basic work getting paid more than the guy that's doing maybe not hard on your body work, but hard on your mind work?
Yeah. Stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're going home with the kind of jobs that keep you awake in the middle of the night. You wake up and, I was just talking to a friend the other night there, and we're like, did you ever fix a car in the middle of the night? And I'm like, I fixed hundreds of cars in the middle of the night. I'd wake up, I'd reach over on the nightstand, I'd grab the wiring diagram, flick the light on, and all of a sudden you'd stare at it and it'd come to you, and it's like, oh, you jackass, you didn't check that, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is, right? And you'd go back to work the next day, and more often than not, you had the epiphany and you fixed the car. Yeah. Whereas the guy that's just doing, ball joints and brakes all day, he goes home, sleeps on a big mattress of money. He don't stress about nothing.
Yeah.
Like it's two different animals. It really is. It's like an industry within the industry. So at Ford, were you fighting the warranty thing a lot? Like, how was that to get paid for your electrical diag?
Yeah, Ford warranty is really bad. I've never seen. So if you want to see people who hate the brand they work for, look at some Ford Facebook groups, Ford technician Facebook groups. Yeah. Man, do they hate the brand. And the problem isn't the vehicles. Well, I mean, some people might have other opinions, but the problem is the way they pay for warranty is just so bad. Like, you might get 50% of what you put into it if you're lucky.
That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Not doing that. I see some of the guys, like on social media, YouTube and TikTok, that are Ford techs, and sometimes they talk about, there was a guy that just, I think what the heck was his name? A-Rod or something like that, Power Strokes with A-Rod or something. And he just quit the dealer after like 24 years. Just got terminated from the dealership and left, going out on his own. And I saw his video he posted about it, and it wasn't so much like, you always see them, and when they're making their content, they're not running the brand down, but they're not also talking about like how bad they're getting screwed on some of these jobs. Like, I understand after you do enough of the phasers and the water pumps and whatnot. And, some of them you get the cab off in 45 minutes, right? And then you're just laughing
Yeah.
because you're banging that job out in a ton of time. But then next month they'll shave the time down.
Yep.
Because they figured out that you're pulling the cabs on them and you're doing it faster. And then what used to be really good is not good anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Ford is really bad for that. The first time I heard that actually was not when it was before I started working at Honda, but it was at Honda where for the phasers on the 2 liters and 2.4 liters, they were paying you to pull the full timing cover off. And it was like a, I don't know, 8-hour job, 10-hour job, whatever. And then an aftermarket company called Skunk 2 was putting out camshafts for these engines. And they said, oh, you just got to put a bungee cord on the timing chain, run it to the hood, zap the phaser off, blah, blah, bing, bang, you're done. You don't have to take the cover off. Suddenly, Honda drops it from whatever it was, 8 or 12 hours down to 2 hours.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I guess in this case, you could say it is fair. It still sucks though.
Yeah. Were you guys already before the aftermarket released that lovely, bit of information? Were you guys already cheating and doing it that way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, like in that case, I guess it is fair that they dropped it, but like say a Volkswagen was really fair, like for doing those TD updates. They knew I was only putting 4 hours into it, but they never changed the time on it, at least not while I was there, and they never charged me back. But I had like a pile of sockets that were all custom length and whatnot to get it done in that amount of time.
Yeah. I mean, for me, Chrysler, I never saw, like I saw dash jobs eventually get cut in time because they figured out that like you didn't have to take all those panels off, right? You undid like the brackets on the side, you pulled it back, you ran the, bungee cord around it, tied it to the steering wheel, snuck your heater box at the passenger side, did your evap or your heater core and put it back in.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I wasn't doing a ton of those jobs. Like they didn't give those to me. I was always in the middle of something else. So, but I did remember like the old LH cars, it used to be 12 hours or something like that to do an evap, and guys got them down to where they're doing them in 2 hours. And then of course, guys go to training back when training wasn't remote. It was done in the classroom. Yeah. And they'd all sit around and talk and say, hey, well, this is how I do this and this is how I do that. And sure enough, the guy listening to the class, he goes back to headquarters and tells them, well, they're doing it, and then all of a sudden you'd see the time cut. So
yeah, everyone wants to look like the hero with the best time save, but unfortunately, when you're giving it away at HQ, doesn't help anybody.
No, I mean, and it's one thing to sit there and talk shop at those training events, because I mean that's some of the time that's the only good part about going to them is, and especially on the OE side, is talking to different guys that are on the product but in different parts of the province and hearing what they're seeing a bunch of.
Yeah.
I can remember I went to a training class in Toronto for Chrysler on Sprinter vans, and we hardly had any Sprinters where I was in Kingston. We might have had 5 vans in the whole city. They had like 5,000 by then in Toronto.
Yeah.
So they literally had these techs that's all they did was work on Sprinters. So they were seeing stuff faster than even like headquarters was knowing it was going to break down. They're like, oh yeah, we're doing a pile of this and a pile of that. And it was like, that was great. You'd come away, but he'd tell you, oh yeah, like I do glow plugs in them in 45 minutes. And I'm thinking, good God, man. Like, I watched the guy do all day, and because, they would break off and they were seized in there. He's like, nope, this is how you do it. Bang, bang, bang. So I just, if you're going to training and you got secrets, wait to go on lunch and share your secrets, guys. Don't share it in front of the teacher because they'll rat you out. What, how did the mind thing come across then for you?
Yeah. So I grew up in a very poor family, which kind of set me off kind of behind everyone. And for most of my career, I wasn't able to get away to training, to do the schooling to get my red seal. When I was with Honda, I went through the Honda program, and it was all paid, so it was a little easier. But I had to still go to Markham, so I had to find somewhere to live and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And when I got back to Sudbury and I was working at Volkswagen and I got licensed, I didn't feel any kind of like pride. It's like, okay, I'm the same guy I was yesterday, but now I'm worth more. It's like, why am I worth twice as much now than I was yesterday? I was doing all the same work at the same quality that I've been doing for the last 15 years. And I didn't feel any pride about it. And I could feel the damage it was doing my body, my hands specifically, where I would lose. Like, I didn't have the strength I used to have in my hands. So my buddy worked at a mine called Detour Gold. Mm-hmm. And he was in the warehouse in the parts department. And we're looking at our paychecks, and they're close. He didn't quite make the same, but they were close. And I said, well, I heard with Toromont, like, there's a lot of room to move up. So maybe this is my avenue. I'll get in the warehouse and see what happens. So it was a 2-week rotation. So you do 2 weeks there and 2 weeks home. I would do 2 weeks in the parts department warehouse at Detour Gold, come home, have a few days off. I'd work a week at Volkswagen, a few days off, and then go back up to the mine. Because Volkswagen didn't want to let me go. So they would actually, stuff that was like a hard electrical diag, they would just park at the back of the lot, and I would fix it whenever I got back.
So it could sit there hypothetically 2 weeks until you return.
Yeah, 2-3 weeks until I got back, and then I would fix it.
Wow, that's a great dealership.
But like, the customers didn't have a choice because nobody else wanted to work on it anywhere in town. And so what are they going to do? So they would just leave it there till I came back. I'd bang out a bunch of work, and then
that's pressure on you, though, right? Because I mean, it's like you got to look at that and go, well, I'm only here for a week maybe, and then I'm gone back to the mine. So I've got to figure out this car. Plus, I'm sure as soon as Monday rolls up, you walk in, they're like, oh, Lee, thank God you're here. We got this, we got this, we got this, we got this. How's it going at the mine? And you're like, well, you know, I'm making more money at the mine than I'm here. I'm only half dirty. Like,
yeah.
So when you went to the mine, you just worked in the warehouse. You didn't even work on the equipment.
No, I was just in the warehouse doing parts, and then where I could, I showed additional skills with computer stuff, and I would write scripts to get jobs done quicker for, like, say a machine was in for maintenance. There'd be a whole pile of stuff in the warehouse marked for that unit. But often all that stuff didn't end up out in the shop, and then a lot of work got missed. So I wrote a script that went through the database, pulled everything that's stored for that unit, gave you the whole list, and then it needs all this stuff. And then work started getting done on time when it was supposed to happen. So like just different things like that. And there was a product support manager there that took notice, and he talked to his old boss and got me into a fleet analyst position for Toromont at Baffinland Iron Mines. So Baffinland is so far north that you don't see the northern lights.
Wow.
So you would fly out of Montreal 6 hours. You would land in Iqaluit and then fly another 2 hours north. Yeah. So that place is really beautiful in the summer.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Really, really cold in the winter. The summer is about 4 weeks.
It's short. I mean, I've never been up that far up. So, I mean, and I can say this, like if I was leaving the mine and flying back into Montreal, I probably wouldn't leave Montreal. I'd probably just stay because I mean, I've spent enough time in Montreal. I loved Montreal. Loved it. It's a fantastic city. And it'd be hard pressed in the summertime if I landed in Montreal to want to go anywhere but in Montreal in the summertime. It's a beautiful place. But hey, if you could do me a favor real quick and like, comment on, and share this episode, I'd really appreciate it. And please, most importantly, set the podcast to automatically download every Tuesday morning. As always, I'd like to thank our amazing guests for their perspectives and expertise, and I hope that you'll please join us again next week on this journey of change. Thank you to my partners in the ASA group and to the Changing the Industry podcast. Remember what I always say, in this industry, you get what you pay for. Here's hoping everyone finds their missing 10 millimeter, and we'll see you all again next time.